Be the Best You podcast. The sole purpose of this podcast is to teach, inspire, and motivate everyone to be the best versions of themselves. Welcome to the Be the Best You podcast. I'm your host, Larry Dawson. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to another episode. Please, no matter which platform you're watching or listening to, like, subscribe, and share. Today's episode is self-sabotaging. How many of you out there have either been guilty of self-sabotaging or know several people that self-sabotage? I think that everyone at some point or a time has self-sabotage themselves in some type of way. So as I told you before, each and every episode on the Be the Best You podcast, we're going to dive into different areas and touch on different subject matters and figure out how we can become the best versions of ourselves. So today we're going to dig into self-sabotaging and how that holds us back, how that sets us back, and how we can't really become the best versions of ourselves until we address this issue. So, how many people out there know a guy or a girl that's been in a relationship and they've been done wrong, taken advantage of, abused 10 times, 12 times? Well, you would tend to think that the issue is the person that is getting abused. It's the people they're dating or married to or whatever. But in actuality, a lot of that ends up being that person. And what I mean by that is we are creatures of habit and we tend to do the same things. And also we have self-sabotaging mechanisms in us that we don't even realize. Our conscious and our subconscious literally playing a tug of war. So if you know someone out there that is going through that, check this out. We get addicted to feelings. We get addicted to emotions. We get addicted to the chemicals that are released during these events. So if you had a bad experience when you was younger, instead of addressing that issue head on and moving past it, a lot of times we get addicted to that feeling. I know that sounds crazy, right? Who would get addicted to feeling bad or being abused or being cheated on? But we do. Our body releases chemicals, and these chemicals are released based on things that happen to us, feelings and emotions. So look at yourself as a robot, the same as a car. You need oil and you need gas to go. Well, your body's the same way. It needs these chemicals to go, and they're released into your body based off of your emotions and your feelings. So when you become addicted to things, whether they're good or bad, good feelings, bad feelings, good emotions, bad emotions, your body starts to crave them. It's why when you have the opportunity to end one of those bad relationships and go in a different direction, you end up going back to another one because your body is craving it. Just like the car, the machine is craving the oil and the gas that it needs to run. Now this can be switched, but it takes consciously being aware, and a lot of us aren't. A lot of us, pride and ego gets in the way, and a lot of us play the victim. And who's going to admit that they're actually the problem, right? It couldn't be yourself. There's no way you're addicted to pain or trauma or drama. But in actuality, it's scientifically proven. It is a fact. Now, this can be changed, but it takes being aware, it takes work, and it takes changing that to where you, after a certain amount of time, your body doesn't thrive off of those emotions, it thrives off of the new emotions and the new chemicals and the new feelings that you've got your body addicted to. Even when someone gets out of those relationships, before they put themselves back into those relationships, have you ever noticed, like, when they talk about it, when they're talking to their friends or family members and talking about it, the way they act? There's also a reason for that as well, is because your body doesn't understand the timeline of emotions. And what I mean by that is, when you start putting yourself in a mental state to, say, maybe relive getting beat up or abused or cheated on, your body doesn't know whether that emotion is currently happening in the now, or that's the emotion that you're reliving from 6 months ago or 6 years ago. Your body starts to feel it, and those chemicals are being released into your body again. It's why some people hold on to stuff and never actually let go of it. Because even talking about it and feeling those emotions allows their body to get those chemicals released so they can get that dopamine hit again, so to speak. So what I just said is a lot, and it's probably going to take some people some time to digest that, and you're probably going to want to go and look that up and do research for yourself, and that's fine. But it is the reason why a lot of people continue to self-sabotage. And another reason that people continue to self-sabotage is a feeling of feeling unworthy. Like you don't actually deserve certain things in your life. So if you don't believe that you actually deserve a great relationship, a promotion at your job, to make this certain amount of money, to do these things, to have these cars, to have these houses, then you're going to self-sabotage yourself on the way because you don't feel like you actually deserve them within. And the fear of rejection will actually make you shut it down before you even get to it. If you don't feel like you deserve to be with the best looking guy in the room, then you'll never be with the best looking guy in the room because you will sabotage yourself and shut it down before you even have the opportunity to. Another reason that people tend to self-sabotage is because of past experiences. If you were molested at a young age and it did some psychological damage to you that you still haven't addressed because you haven't fully dealt with that issue, there's this flight or fight that human beings do. So usually you go very far one way or very far another way. Very rarely do you meet in the middle when something like that happens to you. So if your behavior pattern becomes to sleep around a lot, because that's one way that it would drive people, and you get older and you have destroyed several relationships because you continue to do this, and it has not only destroyed several relationships in your life with, say, family members, boyfriends or girlfriends, co-workers, it has also made you feel really bad about yourself and not want to do this. But because you never addressed the real issue of what happened to you and dealing with those emotions and getting through that once and for all and putting that to bed forever, then you will continue to make those same mistakes because your body has become adjusted to thriving off of those emotions and those chemical releases in your body. Now, I could have sat on here during this episode and I could have gave you some cool talk, some hip talk, some stuff that would have grabbed your attention and grabbed you by the shoulders and shook you around. I could have gave you some pure motivation. But that's not actually going to help you. Shaking someone by the shoulders or giving them some motivation to help them actually overcome self-sabotage is only like putting a band-aid on a bullet hole. To actually fix self-sabotage, you have to understand why you do it. The chemicals in your body, the patterns in your mind, the subconscious versus the conscious, the trauma that we go through, the self-doubt that we have, the feeling of undeserving. You have to dig deep and really understand this and get to the root of the problem, because it's the only way to truly fix the problem once and for all. So I thought this was a very interesting topic to touch on. And what I did was I put a filler out there through social media to ask some people, what type of questions would you like for me to answer for you dealing with self-sabotage? How can I help? If you're going through something, if you have something on your mind, if there's something you would like for me to hear addressed dealing with self-sabotage, put it out there. I'll bring it up on the show and I will get to the bottom of it for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through a couple things that was sent. We're just going to pick a few out and we're going to address them. So let's see what we have here. The first one is by Dr. Raleigh Mahaffey. And he says, why are we more addicted to self-sabotage and bad habits than we are to actually addressing the problem and fixing it once and for all? Okay, so why are we more addicted to self-sabotage and bad habits than we are actually addressing the problem and fixing it once and for all? Because of everything I just spoke on, the way your body fiends for those chemicals and those emotions, whether you want to admit that to yourself or not, that is actually what's going on inside of your body. Plus, there's a thrill and a rush from doing some of the things we know we shouldn't actually be doing, and we get addicted to that feeling as well. Even if you feel bad immediately as soon as you get done with it. That quick dopamine hit of doing it in that moment, that thrill. And the reason we don't try to fix it once and for all is because to fix it once and for all, you would have to go to the root cause. Some of us don't know ourselves enough and aren't honest with ourselves enough to get to the real cause of what is making us make these decisions and act like this and self-sabotage ourselves. So before we would dig into ourselves and get to the root of the problem and deal with the emotions that we would have to deal with to actually fix the root problem, we would rather play the victim role, continue the self-sabotaging behavior, continue with the bad behavior to get the dopamine hits and get the chemicals released in our body, only to complain about it later, and to self-sabotage ourselves, which never allows us to fully address the ultimate issue. That is the reason why that we ultimately choose to not do away with the bad habits and to not actually address the issue once and for all. I would like to say to everyone out there, from someone that's had to do this on a personal level and who has counseled hundreds and hundreds of other people that have had to do this, it can be done. So if you are listening to this and you are thinking, man, that's me, or that's someone I know, or how can I change this? You can change it, but you have to make the decision that you're not going to halfway do it anymore. You're not going to just talk about it. You're going to have to dig deep inside yourself and understand yourself and understand what has caused you to make these decisions. And just like you created those patterns and those habits, you're going to have to uncreate those patterns and habits, and you're going to have to form new patterns and habits. And eventually your body will become addicted to those feelings. those habits, those patterns, those chemicals that get released when you do that. I promise you this, if you're watching or listening to this video, it can be done. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of work, but this is your life. You don't get another life. So instead of being on that merry-go-round of making bad decisions and you can't get off of it, get off of it. Take control of your life. Get to the root of the issue and fix it once and for all. That was actually a really good question, and I appreciate that question. So the next question is by Doug Wilson. And he says, how do we stop worrying about the future and live in the present? When I saw this question, I said to myself, this is actually a very refreshing question. And the reason I said that this is a very refreshing question is, for so many years, probably 90% of the time, I'm dealing with people that can't let go of the past. It's even an issue I had to address during my transformation. And it's something that I'm constantly having to help other people with. Coming to peace with the past, letting the past go, moving on from the past. So to hear someone ask the opposite and ask about the future was like, man, I don't get that very often. I'm actually excited to talk about this. Not excited that anybody's going through this, but excited to be able to address this issue. One more time. Doug says, how do we stop worrying about the future and live in the present? Well, just like anything else in life, we develop habits and patterns. And once these become our habits and patterns, that's what we become addicted to. That's who we are. But you can change that just like everything else we've talked about. One technique that I used with a good friend of mine years back, I'm not going to give his name out, but he was going through a pretty rough situation. He kept stressing about it. He kept going back to it. He kept stressing about it. But right before he went into the situation, he had just started meditating. And he was asking me questions about meditating. And he was saying, man, my mind tends to drift when I'm meditating. And I said, yeah, it happens to all of us. But when your mind starts to drift, you have to say no. And you have to bring your mind right back, concentrate on your breathing, relax. So he started meditating. He started getting good at meditating. So when he was having the conversation with me and he kept on about what he was stressing out in this moment, I told him, I said, you have to do what you practiced in meditation and what I talked to you about meditation. When your mind starts to drift to the future, to worry about the future, you have to immediately pull it back to now. And you have to keep doing that and keep catching yourself. And you have to train your mind, which is possible. You can train your mind to do anything. So if you can catch your mind and pull it back just like you do when you go to meditate, each time you can stop doing this and stop worrying about the future. I actually talked to my wife about this earlier, and she said worrying about the future is the equivalent of walking around outside with an umbrella all the time, just thinking that it might rain. So I've counseled people and tell them you can't live in the past and expect to have a happy present. I'm going to say the exact same thing in reverse. You can't live in the future and expect to have a happy present. You have to focus on your life in the now. One of the things we're talking about is having control of your mind, being consciously aware of who you are and your decisions. That ties hand in hand with this. Being consciously aware. So when you ask this question, I assume this is something you're doing and you're going through. That means you're consciously aware that you're doing this. That's the first step. You already have the first step down. You've already acknowledged it. You're not blind to the fact of what you're doing. The next step is to start catching yourself and bringing yourself back to the moment each time and training your brain to think like that. Plus, man, we only get one life. You got to live your life. Anything can happen in the future. Focus on now and enjoy your life. It is rare. I do not hear anywhere near as much about people worrying about the future as I do the past. But breathe, man. Worry about the now. Plan for the future. And if your mind starts to run wild and your mind starts to jump out and worrying and worrying and worrying and thinking about what could be, what might be, what of, what if, stop. Bring your mind back. Good question, and thank you for asking me that. I haven't been able to address the future in a while. The next question is from Hayward Carter. How does self-sabotage affect you mentally on the way to your goal? Well, a lot of times we set goals for ourselves and we don't think that we actually can pull it off or that we're worthy of those goals. So before we get rejected or don't make it, we will self-sabotage ourselves. But in reality, we don't know if we wouldn't make it because we're not even allowing ourselves a fair chance to try. So if you have a young NBA player that comes into the league and he has a couple bad games, misses a couple shots, gets down on himself, now he starts to question if he belongs. He starts to question his talent. He starts to question if he should shoot the ball when he gets the ball. Now his self-confidence is destroyed. He doesn't believe in himself anymore, so he looks like a shell of himself when he's on the court. But this is all mental because we're all going to have bad games. I remember listening to an interview by Michael Jordan, and they were talking to him about breaking scoring records and scoring his points, and he said, I missed 9,000 shots. But he didn't let those misses deter him from the ultimate goal of breaking these records, scoring these points, winning these championships, being considered the greatest player of all time. Too many of us defeat ourselves before we even have the opportunity to succeed. So if you have goals and you're self-sabotaging yourself on the way, I would say you need to do a reset. You need to look within yourself and ask yourself why you truly don't believe in yourself. Too many times people try to act as if how they think people see them versus who they really are or what they're really capable of. If you can dig deep inside yourself and answer these questions and figure out the whys, you'll have your answers. If you don't necessarily believe that you deserve something, you are going to self-sabotage yourself on the way. The fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being good enough. But see, fear isn't real. Fear is false evidence appearing real. If you want something and it's a goal, you have to go for it 100%. Whatever you're doing to block yourself, whatever roadblock you're putting in sabotage yourself, be aware of that behavior pattern. So the next time you set a goal and you're on the way to that goal and you start to doubt yourself, you start to question yourself, you do self-sabotaging behavior, you can catch yourself and break those patterns and break those habits so you don't continue to live your life like that. There was a second part to this question. Let me touch on that. So the second part of that question from the same person, and how do you differentiate from being honest with yourself compared to self-sabotage? Well, I think I kind of touched on that a little bit just now. If you're truly honest with yourself, that is what will stop you from self-sabotaging. You have to be truly honest with yourself and see yourself for who you really are. Not the image you're trying to portray, not the emotions that you're making decisions off of, but who you really are so you can understand what triggers you to make these self-sabotaging decisions. Everyone has natural self-sabotaging components to them. Some people understand themselves and are able to catch themselves and check themselves and fix themselves, and others can't. Others can't get out of their own way, and then they just whine and cry and bitch about it and stay wallowing in that misery and repeating the same stuff over and over and over and over. I'm not trying to make light of anybody going through that out there. I'm trying to give you knowledge on the situation so you understand how to address it and deal with it and fix it so you can live a healthy life without self-sabotaging yourself. So I have another question that was asked. It was asked by Javario Crawford, and he said, why do people put themselves in bad situations when they already know the outcome? I'm still going to answer this question, but it ties hand in hand in everything else that we just touched on. It's because we get addicted to those feelings and those emotions. And also, on personal level, there's reasons why people do stuff. Sometimes people are lonely. Sometimes people are addicted to doing something they shouldn't actually be doing. The thrill, the rush. Some people battle self-confidence and self-esteem issues. There's a lot of personal reasons why people would make bad decisions when they already know what the outcome is going to be, which all falls in line with self-sabotaging. I tried to give you a clinical diagnosis and step-by-step understanding of why we do what we do today. If you're listening to this episode out there and you know that you're going through this, or you know that someone else close to you is going through this, whether it's a family member, a friend, a spouse, I hope that the things we touched on today can give you a better understanding. Because I think sometimes when we see people act a certain way or make certain decisions, we tend to judge them and talk junk about them and get frustrated with them, not knowing that sometimes there's a reason behind it, there's a clinical diagnosis behind it, there's chemicals involved, the brain's involved, the subconscious versus the conscious, and that people get stuck and can't get out. The number one thing that I want to say to everyone is that you have to be consciously aware of your decisions and why you make the decisions that you make. If your decisions aren't healthy decisions that help improve your life, then look in the mirror. Because no one should be in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 relationships. No one should be going through jobs like that. No one should be constantly falling out with family members. No one should always be in a bad mood. No one should always have these things going on with them over and over. But the reason why a lot of times is they haven't been honest with themselves, and they haven't clinically diagnosed themselves of why they act the way they act and why they make the decisions that they make. They have to fix themselves, or if you're listening and the issues with you, you have to fix yourself before you can stop this from happening. So be mindful if you find yourself in these situations over and over and over again, that it's not someone else all the time, that it's actually probably you. The problem is, most of us lie to ourselves first and foremost before we lie to anyone else. And most of us aren't going to be honest with ourselves and say that we are the problem, because we convince ourselves we aren't. That way we don't have to look in the mirror and we don't have to address the issue head on, because we don't want to do that. But that's what we have to do, and that's what we need to do, especially if you're going to get through this and break that cycle and stop the self-sabotaging behavior once and for all. I promise you this: if you make that decision, your life will change for the better forever. And if you ever catch yourself drifting back, then you are now consciously aware. So you can catch yourself before it spirals out of control. Thank you guys that asked those questions today. I really like corresponding and communicating and going back and forth with people that support me and watch my stuff and listen to my stuff. You guys are always welcome to ask me questions. It doesn't even have to be on a particular upcoming episode. If you guys want me to address anything, you guys can reach out to me through my website, LarryDawsonBTBU.com. You can check me out on social media. I'm on all the social media platforms, Larry Dawson BTBU. You can also shoot me an email, LarryDawsonBTBU@gmail.com. I would be happy to help or answer any questions for anybody. I hope all you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know today's episode was a little bit different. We dug in there kind of deep. But I want you to know this. If you truly want to do the work that you need to do to become the best version of yourself, then that's what you have to do. You have to dig in there deep sometimes. You have to do that soul searching and truly understand yourself. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't wait to see you guys at the next episode. Thanks again for tuning in to the Be the Best You podcast. Until next time, I'm out.